One of the reasons I love Batman the Brave and the Bold so much is its exaggeration of the already very exaggerated comic book logic. Time travel is such a commonly used device that Batman can just pop in and out of any era without any explanation. He's fought in pretty much every major war. But there is something about Brave and the Bold's time travel that never really made sense. And believe me, if I'm saying this show doesn't make sense, you know it's a big deal.
Booster Gold is a frequent returning character who gradually gets more important as the series goes on. He's a time traveler from the 25th century, and of course, his time period is depicted as the stereotypical blue, hyper advanced utopia.
But here's the problem. There's actually a different time traveler, also from the future, except their future is a destroyed post-apocalyptic wasteland with a bunch of human-animal hybrids roaming around. This is Kamandi, aka the last boy on Earth, and his future is called Earth AD, as in after disaster. This just makes no sense. How can one future humans be on the brink of extinction, yet in the other they're completely thriving? Well, maybe Earth AD is just an alternate universe, one of those endless possibilities. But that can't be it. We're explicitly told that Earth AD is the future. Earth AD has to be before the 25th century because their technology isn't that advanced, so is it possible that in that time humans could rebuild civilization and take over the world again? I mean, maybe. But there's two problems with that. In the episode Triumvirate of Terror, we catch a glimpse of the future 50 years ahead, and not only is everyone still alive and the world not destroyed, but technology has actually evolved past what it is on Earth AD. And before you get all hissy, I can see the DeviantArt watermark. That is a real screenshot. Go watch the episode. In the amazing self-parody episode Joker the Violent the Villainous, the Joker time travels to Earth AD and accidentally sets off a nuclear bomb, killing everyone on the planet, including himself. Now, Kamadi was planned to return in a future season, but the show ended up getting cancelled, so this is just how his story ends. My headcanon is that right after Space House, Joker goes back home and then blows himself up. All signs point to there being no way that they could be the same future, but they have to be, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe it's an alternate timeline or something. The time travel rules in the series aren't very consistent. Gentleman Ghost exists as a ghost because Batman went back in time and got him killed. But at the same time, Equinox sent robots back in time to kill Batman's ancestors, and that warped reality and turned it into something it's not supposed to be. The rules seem pretty inconsistent aside from the one factor that there always has to be one single timeline. But just because the rules are never explained, that doesn't mean they don't exist. So to find a more definitive answer, I check the comics. So do they provide a fully laid out explanation for everything? Of course not. From the comics that I read, it seemed more like an alternate timeline. When I asked this fucker, it said it was an alternate universe, and when I asked this fucker, it said it was neither, it was just the actual future. None of this crap matters anyway, it all got blown into oblivion by Crisis. So that whole thing was a bust. But at least we found out what the Great Disaster was, right? Right? I thought it would be funny to go on like a whole spiel where I just explain the entire lore of Earth AD, but after looking at it more, there's way too much stuff to cover, so I'm just gonna probably do a dedicated video on it in the future. But we actually did get something out of this whole thing. Sometimes it said that the Great Disaster was something natural, other times it said it was a nuclear war. I guess it could have been both if it was a natural disaster that indirectly led to nuclear collapse, but the animal people aren't entirely created by nuclear radiation. It was actually a drug called cortexin that mutated them and made them more intelligent. Going back to Brave and the Bold, I will end this mystery the same way I began it, with Booster Gold. For context, Blue Beetle is a superhero that sacrificed himself to save the world, and in the episode Menace of the Madniks, Booster Gold travels back in time and pays him a visit. He wanted to help Beetle take down the Madmen, the one group of villains he was never able to capture. While in the past, Booster accidentally exposes the madmen to radiation from the quirk gun, and upon returning to the future, finds that the world has become this nuclear apocalypse ruled over by these Ben 10 looking monsters. So, of course, Booster Gold and the alternate Batman travel back into the past to demutate the madmen and give their final goodbyes to Blue Beetle. Now, it's a great episode, but there are some details about it I don't entirely get. We don't really know a whole lot about the alternate timeline. Sure, we see a few destroyed buildings, but Batman himself doesn't really look all that post-apocalyptic. Which heroes are alive and which heroes are dead? And then at the end of the episode, Batman goes back to the main universe's timeline. So are there just like two Batmen now? But what is the fate of the alternate timeline Blue Beetle? Did the madmen kill him? If not, then he would have had his hands full with them, right? The Madman incident takes place right before Blue Beetle's final adventure in which he dueled his evil uncle Jarvis. If Blue Beetle wasn't there to sacrifice himself, then Jarvis would have escaped with the Beetle Scarab and successfully created his army of beetle robots. And I don't know about you, but sending an army of robots to attack every major country sounds an awful lot like World War III. And hey, wasn't World War III theorized to be one of the causes of the Great Disaster? The mutant madmen are able to absorb nuclear energy, and if all the heroes and governments of the world are busy fighting Jarvis, who's going to stop them from absorbing every nuclear power plant on the planet? And if you're familiar with energy absorbing characters like Electro or Parasite, usually they have a limit to what they can absorb. So these things, the more they absorb, the bigger they get. I think if they absorb enough nuclear radiation, they would eventually explode, coating the entire planet in radiation. Little side note here, I really like the way the monsters look. When I said that they looked Ben 10 looking, it's because they, especially the mouths, remind me a lot of Derek J. White characters, kind of like Gravitack or even Plasmus from Teen Titans. And the like explosion patterns on their bodies look kind of like old school comic art that you'd see in like done by Jack Kirby, which is really funny because Jack Kirby made Earth AD. And my belief is that the world wouldn't be able to survive the combined might of the mutant Madniks and Jarvis Cord's robot bug army. Of course, eventually the world would fall, everything would be destroyed, Omac would escape to the Command facility, becoming the grandfather of Commandi, and the Cortexan virus would be released, creating all the animal people. Really, the only thing disproving this theory is the fact that the alternate timeline is erased at the end of the episode. But, like, come on, a post apocalyptic future in an episode that just happens to be post apocalyptic? It has to be a prequel. Now, I doubt that the writers of a show that's meant to be ridiculous and not make sense would go out of their way to explain this plot hole, and showing the Great Disaster does kind of ruin its whole noodle incident appeal, but I don't know. What do you think of this theory? Do you think it's possible that Booster Gold caused the Great Disaster? If it wasn't him, then what was it? How would you explain the timeline discrepancy in Batman the Brave and the Bold's future? I think I'll revisit the lore of Earth AD in a future video, try to better explain the comic timeline and what happened, but until then, this has been Bradworst, signing off. So, also in this episode, Menace of the Madniks, there's a little cameo from the Haunted Tank. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. It's like a tank, like haunted. So I did some more research. The guy's a Confederate. The character was made in the 60s, so sure, it was okay to slap a Dixie flag on everything back then. But, my issue with it is that, Jeb Stewart was like a real guy. You know, Jonah Hex was like also a Confederate, but you can write him differently. You can give him a redemption arc. I think he even has like a lesbian great granddaughter too. But this, there ain't no coming back from this. And I'm not saying it's not cool. I mean, like, it's a ghost in a tank. That's always going to be fucking cool. Just why does it have to be a Confederate ghost? Why can't it be a Union ghost? Or a Revolutionary War ghost? Or anything else? I'm not offended. I'm just frustrated. Especially with you, Batman. How could you betray us? How could you betray your best pal, Abe?